Hi, everyone, and welcome to our event tonight. My name is Abby Endler with Penguin Random, and I have just a couple of housekeeping items to touch on here before I turn things over to tonight's fantastic speakers. If you would like to submit questions for our speakers this evening, you can do so by utilizing the Q&A box, which you will see at the bottom of your screen. You can also upvote questions submitted by others within the Q&A box. You can activate the Zoom chat, which should also be at the bottom of your screen, and comment along with the conversation if you would like to do so. Now I'm going to briefly turn things over to Jen Childs from Penguin Random House Library Marketing before we introduce our speakers. Jen, if you could just come up on screen here, that would be great. Hi, Jen.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you? Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Absolutely, I'm thrilled to be here. And again, I'm Jen Childs. I'm with Penguin Random House Library Marketing. I'm thrilled to open the Sure to Be Amazing event with a shout out to all the amazing libraries from Wisconsin that partnered with us to sponsor this evening. 23 of them to be exact. We at Penguin Random House deeply appreciate their support of our books and authors and the support they give to readers everywhere. Especially during these trying times, libraries have remained a source of comfort, enjoyment, and community for us all. So a shout out back, please remember to support your library back. I hope you enjoy tonight's event. And another shout out for our website, Borrow.Read.Repeat.com. There you'll get more reading recommendations, and you'll also get registration information for future book and author events.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Jen, for all of your support for making this event possible. And again, just a huge thank you to all of the Wisconsin libraries that have co-sponsored tonight's event. Without further ado, I am going to ask our speakers to start their microphones and cameras and come onto the digital stage here. I am so delighted to introduce Lauren Fox, who earned her MFA from the University of Minnesota and is the author of the novels Days of Awe, Still Life with Husband, and Friends Like Us. Her work has appeared in numerous publications, including the New York Times, Marie Claire, Parenting, Psychology Today, The Rumpus, and Salon. She lives in Milwaukee with her husband and 2 daughters. Lauren will be discussing her brand new New York Times best-selling novel, Send for Me, tonight with Georgia Hunter. When Georgia Hunter was 15 years old, she learned that she came from a family of Holocaust survivors. Her novel, We Were the Lucky Ones, was born of her quest to uncover her family's staggering history. I know it's going to be a wonderful conversation between these two, so I'm going to turn things over to Lauren and Georgia.
Thank you. Oh my gosh. Hi.
Hello.
Well, thank you, Abby and Jen, and thank you. Oh my gosh, 23 libraries, Wisconsin libraries, incredible! What an effort, and a special thanks from me to Lauren for inviting me to be a part of your tour. I've been so excited for this. I wish it could be in person, but maybe for the paperback. In the meantime, we have people from all over joining us, and I'm so excited to talk about your book. Oh my gosh!
Thank you. Thank you.
And congratulations. The first, just what an amazing launch it's been for you. Straight to the New York Times, a Jenna, Read with Jenna book pick. New York, you're going to be on the Today Show in a couple of days. You guys have to all tune in and watch. It's so well deserved. And I just love this book so much. I got a chance to read an early copy and fell in love with it then. You have the most original and poetic prose, and it just sucks you right in. And I picked it up over the weekend again just to kind of refresh, and thought I might skim it. And my husband kept being like, "Where did you go? Are you sneak reading again?" And I I had spent the whole weekend reading. I couldn't put it down. So for the last 2 days, that's what I did. I reread it, and it's just such a gorgeous and heartbreaking story. And I can't wait to talk to you about it. And I felt like, for me, especially the second time around, I just was so drawn to the theme of love, and especially that love between mothers and daughters. But before we go down that path, maybe, since there are probably a lot of people, it's just brand new to shelves who haven't read it yet, maybe you could start by giving us a little quick synopsis of what the book is about.
Sure. Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you so much. It's going to be hard not to talk about your book too during this conversation, because George's book, We Were the Lucky Ones, is we discussed ahead of time how thematically connected they are. And I'm just so thrilled and honored that you're doing this with me. So thank you so much. So my book, Send for Me, is about 4 generations of women in a family. It starts in Germany, kind of on the cusp of World War II, just as the tide of anti-Semitism is rising, and it moves forward in time to present day Milwaukee. It's about mothers and daughters. It's about the ones who were able to leave Germany and the ones who are left behind. And it's kind of about the stories that get passed down to us, not necessarily overtly, but sometimes as kind of complicated undercurrents, kind of about inherited trauma, but mostly it's about mothers and daughters and the bonds that connect us.
It all shines through, and I'm so excited to learn about your research process. I know for me that was such a rewarding journey, and so maybe you can talk a little bit about that. And I want to mention too, I think this was in the materials that you all were watching before, that will definitely be a chance for Q&A. So write your questions down, submit them, and we will definitely have time. We're going to chat for like 20-30 minutes, then we'll have time for Q&A. But I get to ask some questions first. And so that's my first. I just would love to hear a little bit more about the journey of, can you talk about discovering that shoebox full of letters and what they were and kind of what that meant for you? And was that the first step in sort of in your own journey, and where did that take you?
Yeah, so this is 25 years ago now that I discovered these letters. My grandparents had been living with us in the years before they died. And after they died, all of their belongings from their apartment were in my parents' basement. And they were just there for a while. And one day I was going through them and I happened upon this little wooden box full of letters. I feel like I was thinking about this earlier today. There are few moments in our lives that I feel like we remember as just like still moments from almost from a movie. Like I have such a vivid memory of discovering these letters, and I didn't know what they were. They were in German, and I don't speak German, and they're in this old-fashioned script that very few people can read. But when I found them, I just it was just this like as close as I've ever come to sort of a magical moment in my life. I just knew that they were something. I just knew that they were going to be a key to unlock something, and questions that I didn't have answers to, or just sort of like that they were going to be a piece of a story that I was still learning. So I found the letters, and I was a graduate student at the University of Minnesota at the time, and I took them back with me, and I tried to get them translated. It was hard to do because they were written in this unusual script, but I found someone at the University of Minnesota who I thought he was just going to have some suggestions for me, but he took it on as his own project. It was really lovely. It was a really amazing experience. He himself had grown up in Berlin. He was his father was Jewish, and he had passed in Berlin as non-Jewish, and that's how he had survived the war. So he had a personal connection to this story. And so I would bring the letters to his office, a couple of letters every week, and a little tape recorder, because this was the 90s. And he would read them out loud. He would like translate them as he was reading them, read them in English, and then into the tape recorder. And then I would take them home and transcribe them. And it took us about a year to translate them. So it was like this long unfolding story that I was learning. I almost felt like in real time. Like I still remember thinking, every once in a while I'd walk back to my apartment and I'd open my mailbox and I'd half expect to see a letter from my great grandmother. It was just like, it was surreal, the experience. Yeah, I was time traveling, totally. Yeah.
That is just
So
amazing.
that was the first step.
Your great grandmother in Germany writing to your grandmother in Milwaukee, right?
Oh, sorry. Did I not specify that?
Oh, you might have, but I just want to clarify. And so and these letters over a whole year. I mean, I loved how you talk about in your book. There's a quote where Claire, who is, correct me if I'm wrong, your generational counterpart, right?
Right.
And she's talking about how she discovers these letters. And she says the tone of them in the story feels both familiar and familial. And I loved that. And I just did you feel like you infused your story and your discoveries into that Claire's storyline of her narrative of what it felt like to be discovering this piece of her story? And I'm also curious how much you knew before and how much those letters sort of revealed to you.
So obviously the book is fiction, but I have no problem identifying that like deep connections between, Claire is the character who closely resembles me. So yeah, that the experience of discovering those letters and the sort of like the emotional truth of it is how it unfolded for me. Yeah. And what was the second half of your question?
Well, I'm just more curious, like, I love how you said that those letters, it was like you were reading them real time and what
Mhm.
you knew before. Like for
Oh,
me,
right.
I filled a huge gap in my family history in researching it. Was that a gap in your family history? Did those letters fill a gap for you? Or was it more just this emotional, like you said, like stepping back in time to that era and that time and allowing yourself to imagine what it felt like to be there?
I think I know that for you, you had no idea that this was a part of your family's history. But
No.
I knew, I mean, I grew up with my grandparents and, they came from Germany in 1938 with my mom who was a baby. So I knew like the outlines of the story. I mean, but they never really. So I've been thinking about this so much since the book was released and trying to remember what they told me and what I just pieced together and what my mom told me, but like it really wasn't spoken about in my family aside from the broadest outlines. I mean, you can't grow up with two people with super thick German accents and not know, that that's their story. But
Yeah.
and also the letters don't really tell a story. That, my great grandmother wasn't trying to tell a chronological story. She wasn't trying to
Right.
tell a story at all. She was trying to get out of Germany, and she was writing to her daughter and saying like, "You forgot your coat,
Yeah.
and can you the visas are all wrong." And so it was this sort of like it was like she was dropping puzzle pieces. She wasn't there wasn't it wasn't a particularly coherent story that she was telling, but it was a it was almost like a conversation. I mean, I love that you said it was like time traveling because it was almost like an ongoing conversation I was having with her, and it filled in some of the blanks. And then, um, I mean, I was able to get some. My mom is, happy to talk to me about this history. My grandparents really weren't, so it was all kind of an ongoing process of like sketching out the story.
Yeah. And so I read that you started by thinking about it potentially as a memoir, and that maybe
Yeah.
didn't feel quite right. Like, what was that like right after you discovered the letters in your
So
20s?
yeah, so I was getting my MFA at the University of Minnesota, like I said, and I knew that this was my project. Like I just knew that this
Yeah.
was my like the creative project. I didn't know I'd spend 25 years on it, but I knew that it was, seminal for me. And I thought, you know, truth is there's so much in a world where Holocaust denial exists, truth is crucial. And I felt like, okay, I have to tell this story. I have to be it has to be a memoir. But I was 25 and I didn't have that much to say. It wasn't really my genre, and I wasn't, I tried to sort of fill in the blanks of my great grandmother's story with like pieces of my life. But I mean, it
Mhm.
was my MFA, it ended up being my MFA thesis, but it didn't really gel. And so after I got my degree, I put it aside for a long time. And over the years, my husband would be like, you should really go back to that. And I was like, no, you don't know me. I'm not doing that. And I can't, but
Obviously,
it
it was
wouldn't.
percolating somewhere inside. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't leave me alone. Like writers are obsessive. It was there, and it just and then like the last 4 years have shown us that. Well, I started thinking about it when the Trump administration
Mhm.
instituted the Muslim ban, and I thought, oh God, this feels familiar. And then we were seeing images of families being separated at the border. I mean, history repeats itself, and so it became sort of, I feel like the story kind of reached like almost like a crisis point for me, and I felt like I had to return to it. And it just made sense. It took a few people in my life to say, you've written 3 novels, maybe this is a novel. So
Yeah,
I can be a little thick.
well, I mean, I love that you wrote it as historical fiction, and you also kept the letters though exactly as they were, right?
Yeah,
It's pretty
yeah.
amazing. They're so
I mean,
haunting. They're so. I love that you did that, and I love knowing that as a reader. When you guys pick it up, it's. I just felt that would made it so powerful.
thanks. That was like sort of the promise I made to myself, that the letters I was gonna, the letters were gonna appear in the book word for word. I mean, I definitely, sort of pried them apart and like rearranged some things. And but I mean, I changed the names, but the letters are my great grandmother's words.
That's amazing. And kind of going back to maybe that trigger or inspiration of sort of it feeling more timely than ever, which is
Hmm.
scary, but so true. Do you feel like living in this world that we live in with these Muslim bans and families torn apart at the borders and rising anti-Semitism and let alone the pandemic where we're all isolated and jobs and relationships and life is just completely upended, has spending so much time in kind of the hearts and minds of, imagining your ancestors and what it was like back then, as they navigated, through the Holocaust and in their own isolation. Has that helped you in any way or given you any perspective as, in this crazy world that we live in today? Like, do you think about it often as you tackle this, pandemic and everything we're facing?
I think, you can't sort of help but feel like, okay, these people lived through something so much worse and they rose to the occasion because they had to. And so, of course, to some extent, I feel like the connection that I felt to my family story has been amplified and illuminated over the past year, just because we're being called to isolate ourselves and, there's so much chatter around us and like so much politics involved in it. And it just feels like, okay, if they could do this, of course we can too. And I had written most of the book before the pandemic, but I was still doing the finishing touches and writing a few scenes, still back in April. And it just felt like, oh, this is, made more, just like, it's just amplified.
Yeah, in a way, it's, you can understand. We'll never be able to understand, but in a sense, you can, with everything that's going on around us today. So, and I definitely felt that, and it gave me that perspective and hope. And one of the things I loved the most about your book, kind of speaking to that, was you created this constant sense of conflict. So you had this impossible decision of Annalise, right, to leave her family behind, for her safety, the safety of her own family. She leaves her parents behind. She's got this heartbreak that results. But you also had these incredibly beautiful moments, these tender human moments woven throughout, as she watches her young daughter grow up, as she bakes apple cake, as she like dips her toes in the cold lake water. And they're just, your imagery is so gorgeous. And I just love that you allowed yourself both sides of that conflict. I love this quote, Annalise's bird walking across a wire, unbelievable good fortune on one side, unfathomable heartbreak on the other. And then towards the end, how strange the convergences, darkness roaring into ordinary life. She is mute with sorrow and filled with tenderness for this undeserving world. So beautiful. So I'm curious, was that a conscious decision to juxtapose the horror and the beauty, the love and the longing, to convey both sides? Or did that just kind of come naturally because it was part of the story?
So short answer, yes, it was a conscious decision. And somebody wrote, I think this was a criticism of one of my earlier books, but I took it as a compliment. Somebody wrote that a novelist doesn't have any special insight, that that a writer is just, well, me, I think they were talking about me, just good at observing details, but not particularly, like, no like actual psychological acuity, just like a really strong. And I was like, yeah, I feel like that's, that was sort of my project. That's been my project all along, just like building the world that we all like. Our worlds are just made up of these intimate, specific, concrete details. And it's just like, if you pay attention, and you do, that's what you see all around us, just these like moments, these nothing moments that just accumulate into our lives. And so that was what I was trying to, that was my project, to sort of build the world out of these like tiny little moments. And I think partly to show just how much was lost.
You did such a beautiful job of that. And it's one of those ways that we can connect, and we feel so,
Yeah.
there were so many parts of this story we're like, oh, I've totally been there as that young mother, and which brings me to my next question, and compliment, which is that you all, we often think about that era and Holocaust era in black and white, or these like sepia toned images, kind of unfathomable statistics, and yet you
Right.
created this vividly colorful and nuanced experience, and which allows us to relate on a very personal level. And I mentioned before, at its core, and you did too, it really felt like you almost sometimes forgot about the Holocaust and what was happening. It was just about this love that the mothers and daughters and this ancestral love passed down. And that's also, I loved, not perfect, right? It's often kind of agonizing between mothers and daughters. And I'll read one more of your passages that I thought was so beautiful. This is Annalise talking about her bond with her mother, Clara. She says, their connection is a deep and wordless blend of boiled potatoes and unsolicited advice, a lullaby about a dog, a sick stomach gently rubbed in the middle of the night, an argument about a hat, vexation and resentment and warmth and need, a viscous flow of liquid, imperfect love. I almost cried reading that. I love that. Can you talk a little bit about that kind of theme of imperfect love? And again, maybe the inspiration from it, did that sort of just bubble up being inspired from your own family history? Or again, was that creative license, or did it come out in your research, or?
All of the above.
All of them.
I think, so I feel like I have this sort of remarkably uncomplicated relationship with my own mom. We just take care of each other, and my children will be in therapy in 20 years and they'll be like, well, we don't have an uncomplicated relationship with you, but I feel like it's pretty smooth going. I mean, most of the time. But I know that my mom told me that my grandmother had a pretty complicated relationship with her mother, that her mother was just hard on her, and some of that came through in the letters. And so it was just sort of like, and I do think part of the reason I couldn't write this when I was in my 20s was that I had to become a mother before I could really understand, just like, not even partly the complicated love, but just like the daily mess of it. I feel like I had to become a mother to understand the not just the daughter's perspective, but the mother's, S apostrophe, the mother's perspectives throughout the novel. And, every day is just a new, like, every day as a mother is, you have a 3-year-old, so you probably know this more intimately than I do right now. Every day is just a new set of like sort of mundane challenges, and so I felt like I was using all of that muck and putting it into the story.
No, it's beautiful muck. It really is.
Well, I'll go with that.
I'm curious about, you have 2 teenage daughters, right? And
yeah,
I think you said they haven't been in school for a year. Holy cow.
Right.
Another conversation, but
it is this conversation.
Yeah, exactly. How are you sharing? Have you already shared like what you learned? Obviously they know what's going on. They're old enough and they've studied the Holocaust. Like, my kids are so much younger, but I'm just kind of curious about how you share this piece of your shared ancestry with your kids.
Well, partly, I mean, this is the first time anyone has asked me that question. So I'm just kind of formulating this as I tell you this, but I think that was part of my motivation in writing the story. They're really close with my parents, so I talk to my mom every day, and they know the story. But my older daughter, who's 18, when the galleys came, when the proofs came of the book, she picked it up and started reading it. I can barely tell the story without crying. She just burst into tears, and she was like, do you mean she never saw her mother again? And I feel like,
yeah,
I didn't know she didn't know that. Like, I think she knew it, but I think reading the book helped her own that story, which was like an amazing and poignant moment for me. Now I feel like, I've written the book so they can read it and I can talk to them. I wasn't particularly, I didn't tell them the story, but they knew it. They just kind of, you just like know the story in some ways through osmosis. I'm not even sure how they know the story, but they know it, and now they know more details.
Yes, and it will always be there, and then for their kids and their kids and so on, and that's got to feel good. So osmosis, did you get the baking? I'm assuming your great grandmother, and did they actually own a bakery?
They did not. They owned a butcher shop, and I was like, I have been a vegetarian since I was 16, and I was like, I'm not setting this story in a butcher shop. So just a bakery seemed like a much more pleasant place to go every day as I was writing this story.
Oh my gosh, by
So
the way, for those listening, do not read this hungry. I don't even know what 99% of the things were you talked about.
but you wanted it.
But I wanted all of it. It was my
Me
mouth
too.
was like salivating.
My grandmother was an accomplished baker, but so I had a really visceral memory of like a lot of those pastries, and so that was really fun. And also, the book was hard to write. Like it was an emotional, it was cathartic and it was emotional and it was draining. So it just was fun to write about a bakery
Yeah,
instead of like the carnage of a butcher shop.
I think that was the right call. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, I've gotten to know you a little bit, and I can't wait to read some of your earlier books now that I'm a fan. But why? I'm curious because you're the first. You have 3 other books, right? And I know you're really funny, and you have like, I'm sure humor is like a big thread throughout your previous work. Did this one feel, like you just mentioned, it was a pretty significant emotional journey? Did this feel like a total departure as a writer, just in your path, your career path, or were there things that you kind of drew upon from your first novels, from your first books?
I mean, I think my 3 other novels have been dark in their own ways. They're not light. One's about infidelity. The other one's kind of about infidelity too. And there's some infidelity in the third one. And they're about like, there's like a thread of sadness running through them and sort of gallows humor. And so I don't know. I feel like I understand that people have said, oh, this novel feels really different from your first 3. It doesn't feel, it feels different to me, but it also feels like I'm using the tools from the same toolbox, but maybe sort of, using slightly, like highlighting slightly different things. But I feel like also writing the contemporary section of this novel, Claire's story, allowed me to like crack it open a little bit and like breathe a little bit of humor into it. So I hadn't written, the first draft did not include Claire's story. And then my genius editor was like, oh, you need to, this is only 2/3 of the way done. And I was like, you are wrong, but she was of course right. So that was kind of a breath of air into the novel.
Yeah, how great. Yeah. I feel like I'm toying with the same sort of idea with my next one, and I'm so excited about the idea of maybe stepping out of that past, that time traveling for a second. So I can imagine how probably satisfying that felt to be able to write something kind of from your own heart, as opposed to imagining it from the heart of an ancestor or somebody who lived some 75 years before. On the writing front, I feel like I'm so fascinated by how all of us do it differently. Like, do you have any, and also for any aspiring writers out there, any tips or best practices, or what works for you? Are you like a morning writer, or I don't know, do you have any kind of like routines or practices that you rely upon to get your...
I so want to ask you the same question. Isn't that just like the most interesting question for writers, isn't it?
I know, like selfishly, I really want to know.
It's been a year since my kids were in school, so I don't really, I wrote diligently when they were in school from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. I don't, I'm my best in the morning. And I take notes like a maniac. I really take a ton of notes. And then I have like these 200-page documents that are just full of notes. And like, what have I done? But I also feel like do you do the same thing?
I do that.
It's overwhelming.
Yes.
And I think the best tip I have is, this is gonna sound so strange, but I really mean it. Like the best thing you can do, maybe especially now during the pandemic when our schedules are so sort of off the wall, is to really, really try to live as a writer, to just like be in the world. It can be so easy to just kind of fall into the day-to-day, just like the moment by moment, like domesticity or whatever else you do in your life, but to like pull back a little bit and observe and think like a writer. And who was it who said it's all material? I don't necessarily think it's all material. Oh, it was I can't remember. I'll remember it tonight and kick myself, but it was a famous writer who said it's all copy. Just to remember that like everything you observe and everything you experience has the potential for you to write about it and for it to appear in your work. And so like I think that's the most significant part of my process right now, since my process has been upended by the pandemic. It's just to remember that I'm a writer and like to look at the world through a writer's eyes.
Yeah,
How about you? What do you
that's
do?
great advice. Same. And then my writing was upended for the several months when we lost our babysitter, but then she came back and I had a quiet few hours a day again. And yeah, I feel like for me, morning as well. I mean, it's probably the case for most, but I'm not like the 5 a.m. wake up person. Just it doesn't work with our daily schedule or my body schedule. But I do feel like if I kind of think the night before I wrap up and walk into the chaos of mom life about what I want to do the next day, and then just sit down in the morning and do it. And like, I don't like, I'm not psycho about turning off email and chat and stuff, but like, I don't really care about that stuff in the morning. I feel like that's my precious time. And I have been thinking a little bit overnight and in the morning about what I want to get done in that first half of the day. And if it bleeds over to the end of the day, great. If I keep writing and writing, otherwise, if I give it a try, 90 minutes, whatever, and I get my stuff out on a paper and then I'm happy. And then I feel like I can go into editing or researching or trying to make sense of that document with 200 pages of notes.
But that like taking it to the end of the day and like letting yourself sit with it, like letting your unconscious work on it is really a huge part of it.
And I stole that tip from an author I did an event with a couple weeks ago, Claire Pooley, who wrote The Authenticity Project. And I was like, I've always been a morning writer, but the thinking about it the night before, it really made such a difference in my morning routine and my productivity. So it was kind of, and you're so right. You just there's so many other things we all could do. And it's thinking about yourself as like, this is my, I am a writer and this is my time to do this, and everything else can wait is equally as important.
Yeah. And like, and also forgiving yourself too, because like, it's just been nearly impossible the last several months. And,
Totally. Being your best self, you have to take into account what's going on around you. Like none of us can be superheroes right now.
And also, and like quieting the voice. I was talking to my British publisher, and she was like, "Oh, complimenting a writer is like pouring water into an unplugged sink." Like, just. And I was like, "Oh, yeah, that's so true. Like, it's so hard to take. Criticism sticks and compliments don't. And just quieting the voice that tells you you will never write another word. Just really working hard to like tell yourself you actually are okay."
Oh, I know. You are more than okay. And on that note, are you working on anything else? Is it too soon to ask?
I'm taking notes. I'm just taking a lot of notes right now.
Do you
Little
like
baby ideas?
Yeah. Do you like the historical fiction now that you've like gone there? Are you thinking you might continue down that path or just kind of see where it happens next?
I really liked writing historical fiction. I found that we didn't talk too much about research other than the personal research that I did, but like your book was I was amazed as I was reading it. Your book is so gorgeously researched and meticulously researched. And I found that process kind of revelatory. Like I really never thought of myself as a historical novelist, and I loved it.
I agree. And those are the details that really, I think, bring the story to life for a reader too, right? The ones that really like put you in that place and time. I remember getting through with the like kind of the bones of my story, the personal story of how my relatives managed to survive, and thinking like, I did it, like I figured it out, the narrative is there. And then it was like, oh, but all the connective tissue is not, like all the other, like what kind of trees were growing in Siberia and what kind of cigarettes did they smoke and crack out, like all those things. And but that's so fun. Maybe it's
and when you discover those little details, you're like, the brand of toothpaste that she would have used in 1936. You're like, oh my God, that was really, I hesitate to say fun because it was researching a really difficult time period, but it's
totally fun. Yeah, it's totally fun. I love that part too. And did you have any books that inspired you? Favorite?
Oh yeah.
Like a couple favorites? Yeah.
I really relied on a book called Between Dignity and Despair, specifically about German women in the late 1930s, and just how the Nazis squeezed German life, because it was really different. It was a really different experience in Germany than it was in the rest of Europe. And the Nazi project for a long time was to get all the Jews to leave, not to kill them. And then it shifted over. So like that, I really relied on that was a really important book for me that I relied on my my research really relied on that.
Cool.
Oh,
Okay.
and also Nora Ephron is the one who said it's all copy. It came
There
to
you
me.
go. I was like, I think I kind of, nice,
Yeah.
nice. Okay, I'm getting a note from Abby that we have some audience questions. All right, are you ready? Should we dive
I'm
in?
ready.
Okay, first audience question. My awareness of family that survived did not, and no one knowing what happened to others only became known 10 years ago. It seems that many Jewish families touched directly by the Holocaust experienced this silence decades after the fact. Could you comment on this phenomenon? Did you experience this? Do you know of others who have? Do you have an opinion why?
That's a good question, a good series of questions. I think the silence is really common. I think people who experience trauma are often inclined not to talk about it, like just simply, and especially that generation, I think, wanted to move forward and move on and like not inflict the next generation with it. And I think that was the case in my family. And I mean, my grandparents were like these incredibly beautiful, loving people. I think they didn't want to burden us with this story, but it's still, as we know, it comes through in other ways. But I think that's a really common quality of people who survive trauma is the I think it can go either way. Actually, I think it can become something that they really want to talk about or something that they really don't want to talk about.
Agreed. And I also think it's interesting how it's our generation that in many cases that enough time
Yeah.
has passed, maybe skipped a generation or two, that has the courage to ask the questions, we're distanced enough from it that it's not so raw.
Right.
I mean, my family didn't really talk about it either, and our story had a very different ending, so I think it's like this listener said, very common. And but I do think there's something said in the farther away we get, and sadly also those survivors, that population soon will be gone. So I feel a sense of urgency, but I think there's something about that third generation that kind of has that space.
Yeah.
A lot of people ask my mom and her sister Kathleen, who are both on here. Hi guys. Why why didn't your parents tell you more? And it's the same thing. They're like, they told us little bits and pieces, but it was almost anecdotal, and it was, we think, a way of protecting. So I think that's definitely common. Okay, here we go. Congratulations on your new book. Can you talk about your writing process? What was the most challenging and or uplifting part of it?
Well, also really good question. And I'm trying to just think about what part of my process I haven't already addressed, but the challenging and uplifting parts of the writing process are kind of one and the same. Just this was I really feel like even though the story is fiction, I really feel like I was able to sort of like put like a through line to the story that I didn't really know when I was growing up. And so that was really like that was really satisfying to me to be able to put the story together, to like read her letters and to think about what they were going through and to talk to my mom and ask her questions. And it was also that was both the most challenging and the most uplifting part of writing this story. And in some ways I feel like I've exercised it in a way. Like it's weird not to live with, did you feel that after you were done with yours? It's weird not to live with it so intensely.
Absolutely. Yeah, I do. I felt like, because living with a story, you feel you're living with those relatives. Like it's like
Yeah,
I
exactly.
came to know them in the process of researching it, and imagine spending so much time traveling back and imagining what it was like to be there. You almost just you come to know them. And yeah, it's transformational.
And also just the psychology of inheriting in some ways this trauma, even though we're both a good long generation removed from it, just like trying to separate the story from yourself. Like that's been like my life's work in a way. And just so finishing this book has been kind of like, oh, now what am I going to be obsessed about?
Yeah, no, I completely hear you. I know people are like, what's next? I'm like, what do you mean what's next? That was like my everything.
Yeah.
I just put it all out there. There was a quote from your book. You said, Claire, who's the youngest generational counterpart, said she's trying to explain to her boyfriend why she can't move to London. She said, I can't just leave them, meaning her family. We don't do that in my family. He could never really understand the primordial soup from which she had emerged. I love that. So it's like trying to figure out that soup and like how it defines us and how it is a part of us.
Yeah.
Okay, a question from Lori. Do you have a special place to write? Maybe this should be like, have you had one in the last year? And before that, was there a different one?
We are lucky enough. We live in a small bungalow, but it's got a lot of doors. So I'm lucky enough. Like what you see in my background is the neatest part of my office, and everything. I half wish I could show you what is surrounding me, like the mess of my office, but it's my office. It's also where the kids come, like, and my daughter will come in after, like, and throw her clothes on the couch, and it's where they used to play, but it's my room and I can close the door. So that's my special place to write.
A door is all you need. A door is gold. It's great. Yeah. A question from Isabel. This might be my mom. How do you think your MFA influenced your writing?
That is such a good question. And I almost don't know because I got my MFA in 1998, and I really went into it just hoping for the time and space and the funding to write, just to have no other worries. I was thinking about that earlier today, how I was making $9,000 a year, and I was like, yes, I can live as a writer now. So I mean, having that time and space though was phenomenal. Like, I mean, just not having, I was teaching, but just not having another job, and I didn't have kids yet, and I wasn't married, and just having no other responsibilities. So I don't know. I mean, I loved the classes, and I loved my writing colleagues. I love, like, they're still some of my best friends and best critique partners. But really, like, just having a couple of years when the only thing I needed to do was write was the most valuable and influential part of my MFA.
It sounds like heaven.
It was.
It really does. I'm always looking into like writing workshops, and some are, like a 1 week here or there things. I take 2 days, 48 hours of just, and being surrounded by other writers. I thought it was really cool. Are you most comfortable writing in the present tense? I wondered the same thing. Julius knows he is tender-hearted. It's an example. I noticed that choice. I'm curious about that.
I think it is the most immediate tense, and it feels the most natural to me. I just wonder if that's like the time we live in, and I don't know. Even when I'm writing historical fiction, I seem to gravitate toward present tense. It seems like the most detail oriented, and maybe the least introspective. I don't know, but it works the best for me.
Yeah, me too. And I remember it almost just, I don't even know if I made the decision consciously, just like I just started writing that way. And then a lot of people ask the same question. We're like, but it's history. Like, did you think about writing it in the past tense? And
but it's not history when you're writing it. It's immediate when you're writing it.
It's happening right there. Yeah. I think it feels a little bit more visceral that way.
Yeah.
Okay. What was your great grandmother's background? Could you tell us a little bit more about her?
So I only know what I know. I don't, that was part of the long project of this. I know she was, I think she was born in 1880, and my family goes way back. There's a member of the extended family who did like a bunch of genealogical research, and that side of the family goes way back to like the 1700s or maybe even earlier in Germany. Like I said, they owned a butcher shop. She was, hard on my grandma. I don't know much more about her. Her name was Frida. And right. Yeah. A lot of like, aside from her words, the character of Clara is, fully from my imagination and like the conversation that I was having with her letters.
Right. Because let's see, your mom wouldn't have remembered her.
No, not at all. She was a baby.
And stories passed down. Were there any it's interesting.
I don't know.
This is a big one. Where do you find your inspiration to write?
I don't know. What is that?
I mean, this one you found it in that shoebox, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like sometimes the best writing is the one that's like you said, you couldn't ignore it, you know, even though you wrote it as a memoir, you found the shoebox, you were like, this is something I need to do. And then you wrote it and then you set it aside for 25 years, but it never stopped talking to you. I think you said it that
Right.
way. I love that.
Yeah, like maybe inspiration, maybe I don't find inspiration. Maybe there are just things that like I'm constantly ruminating about and just like sort of gazing at the world and thinking. And really, I spend a lot of time like muttering to myself and like wandering around my house, right? I don't know. Aside from finding those letters, I've never had like a magical moment of, like the light shining on me. I just feel
Yeah.
like maybe it's more of like a mundane craft than it is sort of like a moment of inspiration,
Mhm. But
like a
that's
choice.
like, look, you could, yeah, I agree. I think, I mean, I'm thinking about that again. Anything that's not the family story feels like, okay, this is a decision to write, not, without sounding
Yeah,
cheesy, a calling to write, you know?
right.
So- and then, yeah, it's your job. You take it every day. Um, okay. This might be tricky to do without spoilers, but if it's possible to speak to the end of the story, our few viewers are curious to know why you chose to end the book the way you did. And if it's not possible to do that without spoilers, then don't worry about it. Maybe you could even you could talk about the storyline you chose to end it with. I don't know. However you want to handle that. You can pass if you want.
No, I don't want to pass, but I knew that the question of the ending would come up. Um, it always does because it
Really?
had to end. It had to end somewhere, right? And
Yeah.
I chose to end it. Well, I ended it with Claire, the contemporary young woman in Wisconsin, kind of making a choice about how she was going to live her life. And it, to me, that maybe narcissistically, it felt like the culmination. I'm going to try to do this without spoilers. It felt like the culmination of the story, like how we carry the burden of the past and what we choose to do with it. And
Yeah.
she, you know, her dilemma is whether to commit to a man who is from England, and whether, and the question of geography and like leaving the decision, the complicated decision of whether or not she would be able to leave her parents behind kind of in a significant way. um so that just felt like where it all landed for me, like all, in some ways I think all roads led to that question, like how do we reconcile history with our lives?
And
How's
how
that?
do you, that's great. And I feel like I've been wanting to ask you all night, like how has this, spending so much time with your own family story, like how has that made you feel differently about moving? How have you reconciled? Do you feel like it was those quiet traits passed down to you that you're sort of just like more aware of now? Or do you make decisions differently? Like,
I have reconciled nothing. I am not nearly as self-actualized as Claire. I live like 5 minutes from my parents, so I don't know. I don't know.
I think it's just, it really is so interesting what we carry with us. We're all, I mean, it's such a universal fascination, our ancestry, whatever it
Yeah.
is. And then when you start to spend the amount of time that we've spent thinking about
Right.
it, for me, it was like things just like would pop up and sort of not necessarily like life changing for me, but just like, oh, that's why I'm like this, or that's why.
Right.
It was sort of just like, oh,
Or is it? I mean,
yeah, I know. Where is it? Who knows? Who knows? It's so fascinating.
yeah, like maybe this book should have just been one page of me saying like I'm a mess and it's nobody's fault but mine. No, but like I yeah, I don't know. I really haven't. I'm getting ready to send my older daughter off to college, so like the like sense of maternal separation is like bubbling up to the surface again for me, and I really don't know, um, what the answer is. So like how we how we separate ourselves from our own particular histories, or how we like let our children go.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh God, that gives me like a panic attack just thinking about. Oh, like my oldest is 9. You have so many beautiful quotes ugh, about this, like, be children of immigrants being anthropologists of our own families. We're participant observers of cultures we live in, but that will never quite belong to us. I love that. Okay, last audience question for both of us. What kind of notes do you typically take when you're just starting out with a new story idea? Is it research or just broad strokes of the new story concept? Want to start?
Broad strokes, just like I just give myself the freedom to write down whatever garbage is in my brain. And sometimes so my other three novels haven't been historical fiction. So this process was new to me, but the note taking hasn't really involved research. It's just been sort of like this, like blah, whatever I'm thinking, and whatever just sort of needs to get out of my brain and onto the computer screen. So really sort of the gift of letting myself just write crap is maybe what my note taking is. I can kind of be like a little meticulous when I'm actually writing, but the preliminary note taking process is no holds barred. How about you?
Yeah, that's awesome. Did you read Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott? Like
Yeah.
a little bit. I mean, there's a chapter on crappy first drafts. The real word is different, but just her whole thing, just like get it out.
Yeah.
Don't judge it. Just put it on paper. That's the most important part. Yeah, I mean, I've only done this once and I'm now trying the second one. Feels very different. I guess I'm not the like, oh, I'll just start writing and see what happens. I have to think about it for a long time. And again, for We Were the Lucky Ones, the plot was there. I just had to uncover it. So it was just like, I felt like a detective or an excavator, like just trying to like pull the story, together by flying around the world and interviewing relatives and looking at records and things. But moving forward, yeah, it's been really interesting thinking about a second story and what it entails, and it's not based on my family history, so I feel like that took a long time, and I thought about it more in themes than I did plot, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So
'Cause
mother
you didn't
daughter,
have to.
yeah, ancestry, and but I feel like I am, once I get the sort of the big idea down, I feel like I'm a little bit too type A to just start writing, and I think I start with an outline and chapter summaries, and then I veer from them. I don't hold myself so closely to them that they kind of hold me back, but I feel like so far, because my first one I needed that so badly. It was 7 storylines and set,
Right.
5 continents in 9 years. Like it was just too much for me to keep track of, let alone a reader. So I think I am now used to that idea of like, all right, let me start with a little outline and then take it chapter by chapter. But the first stuff, the inspiration is definitely thinking kind of big and messy and like, could we go here? Oh, that sounds, could we go there? I don't know. Does that sound right? Why? And I think the question I ask myself a lot, and my mother is such a great editor and she helps me with this a lot, is why should we care? Like, why should a reader care? And if you don't care as the writer, that's going to shine through, obviously. But I think that's a good one to ask as well.
Yeah, you have to think about why the reader will want to turn the pages. I think about that all the time when I'm writing. Like there has to be but I also outline rigidly and then let myself stray from it. It makes me feel so good. Like, oh, I can see, and then it's like it ends up not adhering to that outline, but it's comforting to have.
Totally. I feel like it's like a foundation, and then maybe you can like expand and add some, different rooms that you didn't expect to be in there, but it's a comfort place for me too, for sure.
Because I wrote a draft of a book between my first and second novel, and I was pregnant with my second daughter, and I was like, I don't need to outline, and all they did was sit around talking about how tired they were. So that's become a novel.
Oh, that's funny. Oh, here's Abby.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
We are just about out of time here. Thank you both so much. This was such a wonderful conversation. I feel like I could have listened to you two chat for like the rest of the night here. Thank you both so much. And I just also wanted to give a huge thank you to everyone who tuned in this evening, to Penguin Random House Library Marketing, and to all of our amazing Wisconsin Library co-sponsors for making this virtual event possible. So if you guys have any last words, you're welcome to chime in now, but otherwise I think we are all set here, and just want to thank everyone so much again.
Thank you so much. Georgia, you are amazing. Thank you. This was really fun. Thank you so much.
This has been a highlight. I looked forward to this so much. I knew it would be a fun conversation, and I really it's such a remarkable book. Read it, everybody. It's so good. It's so beautiful. And I'm so excited to see where it takes you. And
Thanks.
Good luck on the Today Show.
Thank you. Thank you, libraries. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
everyone.
Thank you for having us.